It's the completed flatting uh, process, and what I've done is I've also locked my flatting layer, uh, so just to make sure I don't mess with it. So there's my line work, and as you can see, just big blocks of color. There shouldn't be any gaps between these layers, and I think I actually have made a few errors in here along the way. So I've haven't done a perfect job of this where I've accidentally done some of the areas with anti-aliased on. Sorry. So that's my mistake, but there it is there. So that's on my flatting layer, and I've now locked that. There's my line art layer that's hovering above that with the blend mode set to multiply. That is locked as well. I've also done one for the visor. So there's the visor there, and it's it's going to hover above there, but I want to be able to see it. So again, it's a selection tool. It is going to be its own little entity once I'm done. So let's look at what we can do with this. What we're mostly going to use here is go to the W tool. So W is going to bring up object selection, quick selection, and there's a new one on its way. And finally the magic wand. What we actually want is the magic wand tool. So make sure you've got that selected. Anti-aliased, we want to turn that off. Now, in this point, it probably won't make a difference. So you could potentially leave it off if your shapes in your flatting layer are anti-aliased off and anti-aliased is on for your selection tool. It's probably not going to make a difference, so you figure it out. Contiguous, that's something that we want to maybe turn on and off. I'll explain that in a moment. Sample layers we definitely want off because we don't want to be influenced by the line work. We only want to be influenced by this flatting layer. So if we do have sample layers on and we go to select something, what we are going to find is that it's going to also select the line work layer. So let's not do that. So W, sample layers off. So I've got anti-aliased on, contiguous up to you. All right, make sure you are select on the flatting copy, or flatting layer I should say. I'm just going to rename this flatting so it's the same as everyone else's. And what we want to do is create a layer above that. So the typical process for this is you want to add your shadows and highlights and colors on separate layers. Your flatting layers do not need to represent the end colors for your image. They are purely a selection thing. If they do, however, if you've built it specifically with the colors, then you might be able to skip that, but I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to call it color. You can give it a color if that helps you as well. I do like using colors to show things. And I'm going to go use two tools. So I'm going to go W, and I'm going to use G again to add the paint bucket tool. So I'm only going to do this for a couple because my colors are pretty good, but let's say for example, go to my flatting layer, W, and click in an area, and you can see it's selected all of that particular color. If I want to add more of this, I can hold down Shift and add more areas. So Shift still being pressed. If you want to remove an area, Alt or Option key, and that will remove areas as well. So now I've essentially just got, oops, sorry, I'm just supposed to turn those off, is I've got these two areas selected, which means anything I do is only going to be affected inside that. I want to make sure then that I select the layer that I'm going to apply that to. So there is going to be a bit of jumping, which is why you want to make sure you know where your flatting layer is at all time. And now what I'm going to do is go G for my paint bucket, bring up my whatever color it is I want for that, and I can dump it in there and it's going to change that color. So, nice and easy. And again, if you do have contiguous on or off, it means it's going to do both areas at one point, or if contiguous is on, it will only do one if it reaches a border before it goes to the other. So you'll need to make the decision of how you're going to apply that on a case-to-case basis. All right, Command D, deselect. So you can go through and you can keep all of your colors on one particular layer. Let's do something else. Let's add something like a gradient. So you could potentially keep this on your color layer, but the new gradient tool will automatically create a new one anyway. So I'm going to go W, make sure I'm on the flatting layer, and let's select this top part of the helmet, for example. I'm going to go G for the paint bucket, and switch over to the gradient tool. So you might want to play with the classic gradient. It is more destructive, but I'm going to stick with this one for now, and let's choose I'm just going to choose a standard black to white gradient on this, and I'm going to drag this through, and I need to make sure I'm on a layer that's not locked. So there it is there, and I'm going to drag that through. And if you have played with the gradient tool before, great, you can change this from linear to radial or anywhere in between, and you can scale it, and you can double click and color it and all that kind of stuff. So if that gradient tool is working for you, you know, you can do so much with it, and it's going to instantly create through there, and it's going to create a mask on that, so you can go back and change it at another point as well. Awesome. So gradient tool, paint bucket tool, lovely. Flatting tool still sitting there, just, you know, waiting to be selecting stuff. So even with this gradient on, if I go to my W tool and I happen to have sample all layers on, this is where you're going to really see an issue. Is it's only going to select, it's going to look at the gradients on this now. So we want to make sure sample layers off, flattening layer selected, and it's going to select just those big chunks. So contiguous, if I zoom in just a little bit, this pink area here, if I have contiguous, it's going to jump to both sections. If I turn that on, it's only going to select one. So you can always shift select if you want multiple areas. Cool. All right, so great. Paint bucket, gradient tool, all the rest of it. Manually painting. So we can still do manually painting. I'm going to turn off my gradient here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a layer above. I'm going to call this shadows. So the typical way of doing this is to do shadows, color shadows, and then highlights. And I'm going to Command D. Once again, back to the flooding layer, and you can select the area that you want to use. So if I select, you know, all this area here, I can then go to my shadows, and in this case I'm going to manually paint this stuff on. So I'm going to go B for brush, and I currently had previously had the pencil tool. I'm going to go just do a standard brush tool here and right click, and depends on what style you're after. So I'm going to go with a hard cell shading to start with. So I'm going to go something like hard round pressure size, and you can just go classic black for this. Depends on what you want, and you could potentially just paint in a shadow like that. Now this is quite destructive at the moment because it's just a solid black color, but what you can do once you've actually blocked this in, I'm going to do a couple more shadows. So back to this, let's select, so we've got light source coming here, maybe in this on the face a little bit. I'm going to add some shadow. So back to my shadow layer, I'm going to just paint in something like that. Cool. Back to my flooding layer. So you can do this in bulk, or, you know, whatever's necessary. So, you know, I can select a bunch of those. Back to the shadows. If you do wish, you can also create multiple shadow layers, but it's just going to help you paint this through. So that's the hard cell shading. Once I've got a few of these in, what we can then do is start playing around with our opacity and our blend mode. So opacity is going to allow us to drop the darkness on that, and again, it's its own layer, so we can always change it. I'm going to do a couple of other things real quick. Is I'm going to do a new layer for this, and I'm going to go back and just, in fact, I'm going to show you another trick while I've got that. All right, so I've got everything deselected. This shadow layer that I've just created, get that opacity back up, it is kind of sitting there by itself. That's what it looks like currently. I can actually see the errors in that. But if you hold down the Control or Command key, and I'm over here in the Layers panel where the thumbnail for that shadows layer is, if you hit Command on a Mac or Control on a PC and then click in that thumbnail, it will, ta-da, select whatever the contents of that layer is. So as you can see, it's selected around that shadow. If I do it for the flooding layer, it's going to select, you know, everything that's in that. If I hit the visor, it's going to select everything in that. So it's a good little trick to know. Command or Control, click in the thumbnail. So I've reselected that shadow layer. I'm actually going to give a color to this because black's good, but it's, you know, shadows actually have color as well. So I'm going to dump a blue in this. Ooh, cool. And the reason for that is I just want to have a quick look at the blend modes, and some of the blend modes won't do much with black or white because there is no color, and they blend depending on the color. So we can actually click on this and start scrolling down, and there are two that usually work really well. One is multiply, and you can kind of see what it's doing there. It's kind of blending the darker colors in. The other one is overlay, which is going to have a really nice one. Soft light is one that's basically like a softer version of overlay in most kinds, and you can also get some weird ones with difference, and you know, go through them. I'm going to stick with multiply. It's kind of my go-to, and then you can also lower the opacity of that if you want, and build up as many shadow layers or highlight layers or color layers as you want, because you can easily go back and just go, all right, flooding layer, let's, you know, add some more shadow to, or additional shadows to that. So there's my shadow layer. I'm just going to create a new shadow layer. I should be naming this, but I'm very lazy. And now I've got those selected, I can go through. I might just change this to something like soft round, opacity and flow. We'll just do a different type of shadow, maybe just like a nice soft shadow. So I've done hard cell already, but let's do a nice soft shadow for that. And I might just bring that in around just to show that we can. Let's darken that up. Cool. All right, and then once again, you know, try your blend modes, see what works for you until you find something that's going to be just perfect, and then also lower your opacity. So mixing soft cell and hard cell shading can be a bit jarring, but that's up to you. Same procedure for creating our highlight areas. Select the areas that you want. You can do it individually or in bulk. New layer, and let's call it highlights. So you can just go pure white, or you might want to add a little bit of a tint to that, depending on what sort of light you're after. So you could even go for like a rim light kind of thing. And then B for brush, and you know, paint that in. So we don't have to worry about going outside the lines, because yes, we have spent the time to create a usable adjustment layer. So there it is there. It's sitting there, and I can go through my blend modes with this and find something that's going to work. So usually, you know, overlay will work fairly well. This kind of stuff. It depends on the values and the colors of the layers below. Awesome. So play around with the blend modes, play around with creating different layers, shadow layers, highlight layers. The next one I just want to talk about is adding some texture to your image, and for me this is the one where it really jumps in and, you know, adds so much to this. In my old tutorial I do kind of put an actual physical face on this. I'm going to try and do the same, and I'm going to just give you an idea of what I'm looking at here. So I've just typed in face 3/4, and I kind of want to find a 3/4 image photo that's going to match the perspective of this character. So this one here I think is one I've used before. So this is a hit and miss one. I'm just going to copy that image and I'm going to paste it. It's a bit small, but I'm going to put that off to the side anyway. While that's sitting off to the side, I do want to bring in another texture just to show you. So let's do good old rusted metal, and if you type in the word texture, it will typically give you a good texture. Do keep an eye out for good quality size of image, and watch out for watermarks and stuff like that. But I'm just going to copy this image and paste it in there. So hooray, we got a rusted image here. This rusted text, rusted metal image, I'm going to put over just this top part of the helmet to show you how it's done. So I'm going to go to flatting layer, I'm going to go W, and I'm going to select the area that I want to apply this texture to. All right, there's my texture. I'm going to call it texture rust, like so. And with that selected, I'm going to hit the mask button. So this is our mask button at the bottom of the layer panel. If you hover over it, this this dog pops up, but I'm going to click on that, and what you're going to see is anything that was selected will then apply a mask to that image. So there's my rust layer, and it's only going to be visible where that helmet is. At the moment they are linked, which essentially means that if I move one, the other is going to move. But if I unlink the layer from the mask, make sure you're aware that these are two separate entities, I can then move that image and it's going to only be visible inside that mask area. Then what I can do is go Command or Control T, and I can scale that up and get that to fit a little bit better. So there it is there. It's quite flat because that's how it started its life. I can warp this around a little bit, so I'm actually going to do that. I'm going to go Command T to transform, bring up my transformation controls. Let's move this about. I'm going to right click in there and I'm going to go to warp. So there's warp. There's a few others in here for distortion, but this one's really good for getting objects to fit. And then what I can do is start pushing and curving this around to try and better match the helmet. There are some more developments in this. If you do want to have a really deep dive into this, you can actually break this apart into further segments. There's some options up the top for customs and stuff like that, but I do find that this good old standard one's pretty good because it's minimizing how many points we have to actually play around with. So you can kind of get some cool stuff happening there. And then I'm going to apply that. Play around with your blend modes. I really do recommend this. So even once you do have your texture layer, if you go to your blend modes, you can actually see you can get those integrating quite well with the layers below, depending on which one you're going with. So you get some pretty funky. Again, multiply is a great one. If you find the contrasts of this are too high, or the colors are maybe over influencing your background image, you can manipulate that image further by going to image adjustments, and you may want to do something like switch to black and white, which is going to allow you to knock out the colors of it. It's a bit hard to see because the blend mode is currently on screen, but so I'll turn it to normal. So image adjust black and white, and you can see we can adjust based on the color, and then now the color is not going to influence that. If you did like the color and you just want to change it, you can always jump into levels or do something like hue and saturation, and you can cycle through and get different colors in there. So there's a bunch of different ways we can do that, but adding textures is in my opinion it's a great way of just adding that little bit of extra zhuzh to your image. The rest of this is rinse and repeat. We're adding shadows, we're adding highlights, and at any point if our client doesn't like an aspect for it, it's reusable. I'm going to bring this face into play just because I can. I'm going to select my flattening layer, W, select the face area. I'm going to grab the eyebrows as well because I want to keep those. And what did I do with that face image? There he is. So there's the face image there. I've got this area selected, and I'm going to hit the mask button. Oops, wrong layer. There's the face, hit the mask button, and it's added a mask. Now he's still in the corner there, so I'm going to just select him in the layers panel, grab the move tool. I do have auto select off. If auto select is on, it will automatically select a layer above that, and because he is essentially hidden by the mask, we won't be able to move him. You also, if you can't find your layer, if you hit Command or Control T to transform, you can actually see it's going to have the bounding box, and then I can bring that in and scale it up. Now I've made a faux pas here. I'm going to step back. I forgot to unlink my image from the mask. The mask, if I hit Command and click in there, is still there, but I want the layer. So transform, mask stays put, layer scales up, and I'm going to zoom this in here. I'm going to see if I can get this to kind of fit. It's a bit hit and miss. So I'm going to scale this up a little bit. That's getting pretty close. And then right click, and I'm going to go to warp, and I might just try and see if I can warp this in a little bit to try and fit. So you can, as I mentioned, really break these warps down really further. You could also try the liquify tool, but whatever works. On occasions what I'll do is I'll apply the transformation, go Control T again, right click, and then warp, and it's going to reset the guides of that. So there it is there, and you could play around with some blend modes on that if it works, and drop the opacity, or even run it through some filters. So you might want to go filter. Let's go filter gallery, and let's go artistic, and let's go cut out. Give us this, might be a bit closer to the style of the image, like so. So lots we can do, but have a go. If you remember these key steps, you will usually get a really good product, and it's non-destructive, so everybody wins. We'll catch you on the next one.